Welcome to The Wobbly Middle, a podcast for women rethinking their careers in midlife. Bea, thank you for coming into the studio today.
Thank you for having me.
Take me back to your childhood holidays.
Okay. So my parents were always fairly outdoorsy. We lived in Vienna for 4 years when I was a kid from 7. So that's probably where I remember most of our holidays. And we spent a lot of time in the Alps. We did a lot of walking. I remember crawling up a mountain on my hands and knees at one point because I was being forced to walk. I didn't always love walking, but I do now. We did a lot of skiing. We had a little Fiat Panda car. And I remember driving from Vienna to a ski resort, and we had something like 6 different sporting things in our car. We had ice skates, swimming costumes, skis, I don't know, cross-country skis. I can't even remember what they were, but I remember we were all quite impressed that there are 4 of us in this tiny car. We never did really sort of massive athletic endeavours, but we were always very active. We spent quite a few summers on a farm in Austria, which was really amazing, where we just kind of roamed the mountains. I remember helping the farmer with a cow who was giving birth. The calf had, rope tied around its forelegs, and there were 4 kids there, me and my brother and 2 other kids, and we had to pull the calf out when the farmer told us to. So it was really, really cool, and it was just those formative years spent in the mountains, outdoors, and, and in a different culture and a different language. That never left me, really.
And how did it feel moving back to England? Did you move back somewhere quite pastoral, or did you move into a city?
Yeah, so we moved back to London. I quite like change. I had a great sort of teenage years in London. I mean, it's a great place to be as a teenager because you can get yourself around all the time.
Yes, that's what scares me about a teenager in London. And then after school, did you have a big plan? Did you know, or did you already have a sort of wanderlust?
Yeah, so I did definitely already have a wanderlust. I didn't have a big plan, like career-wise. I've never really known I still don't know what to do. But I took a gap year straight after school, and I went to Australia on my own, actually. I credit my parents for this because my mum was just like, I've booked your flight to Sydney. I was like 17. I think my mum knew that it would be a really great experience and that it was really scary and that I might not do it if I was left to my own devices. So, I just went out to Sydney on my own at 18. I mean, I was quite naive, but everything turned out fine. Subsequently, in my university holidays, I went to India for 6 weeks, just sort of backpacking around. That was quite eye-opening. And then after university, I did a big solo round-the-world trip where I went to India, Sri Lanka, Australia, New Zealand, and then quite a lot of time in South America. And that really sort of, there was no coming back from the sort of need to travel.
And then you became an accountant.
So then I became an accountant. Yeah, exactly, which was weird. In that gap year, people would be like, oh, what are you going to do when you come home? And I was like, well, actually, I've got this job with Deloitte. And everyone looked at me like, you, an accountant? So that was a job that I had applied for in my final year of uni. And I did not know what to do. I did a degree in German and maths. I went to a career advisor and she was like, oh, well, you're good at maths, at numbers. And if you want to use your German, then accounting is a good choice because, you could do that in Germany, which is a bit short-sighted if you ask me in retrospect. But I just thought, I should do that. And I got this job with Deloitte and then discovered that I didn't like accounting very much.
How long were you there?
I was there for 1.5 years. So I kind of got part qualified. I did basically 50% of the exams. I think there was a multitude of things. I passed all the exams, but I found them hard. Like I scraped them, basically. It was quite boring. But I think the thing that really bothered me about being in a big 4 accounting firm in London was the culture and the working hours. Like the work-life balance was so crap. I used to leave at like 6:30 sometimes and people would be like, oh, you're taking a half day. I just thought the whole sort of attitude was so rubbish. You just had to stay there for a really long time, even if there was no work to do, just to prove that you were keen.
And then it's unsurprising to everyone who's listened that so you ended up working for various travel agents. Yeah. And so you did then do some travel work professionally.
Yeah.
But something happened when you started having children.
Yeah. When you're working for a fairly top-end tour operator, the clients that you're working for expect you to be there 5 days a week because they have questions and they want to know this and they're about their visa and blah, blah, blah. And especially at the time, there just wasn't the facility for part-time work in those days. And the travel that was expected of you, which I loved, but I used to go to India for like 5 weeks looking at all the different hotels and things. And when you've got a tiny baby, it just isn't possible. So I left travel after I'd had my second child with not much idea of what I was going to do next, to be honest.
And how did the blogging come about?
So the blogging started in COVID because I was bored and had nothing to do and probably was desperate to get away but couldn't. But I did not do any research or thought about how to do it and make money out of it. I kind of wanted to just write some things, and that's what I did. I started a blog, and I used to write quite a lot about camping and the sort of tents we used and a lot of kind of local walks and that sort of thing. But I had no idea how to monetize. I didn't know anything about affiliate links. I didn't know anything about anything really. And then as the world started opening up again, I got a couple of kind of part-time jobs, and then the blogging kind of I just sort of left it, because for me it was literally just a sort of fun thing to do. And then about a year and a half ago, I just sort of thought, well, I've been thinking for a long time, how do I monetize this sort of travel experience and the holidays that we do with our kids without being a travel agent? Because I've been there and I don't want to be the person that people are phoning me up in the middle of my own summer holiday saying, oh, what toothbrush should I bring on holiday? Which is the sort of thing people used to ask me, like, should I bring a manual toothbrush or should I bring a electric toothbrush? I just don't want to be on the end of a phone like that. So I've been thinking, how do I make money out of this? Because so many of my friends are like, these trips are so cool. How do you work them out? What do you do? Anyway, I thought maybe a blog is the thing to do. And then I really, first of all, did my research, and I actually bought a sort of course on search engine optimization and how to monetize a blog, essentially. And then I sort of restarted. So I used the same web address, but I built a brand new website and then focused much more on travel within Europe, really, and the sort of stuff we've done more recently. So the hiking, the cycling, and that sort of stuff.
There was also a moment quite recently where everything seemed to come together and you went viral.
Yes, yes. So exactly. So I'd been blogging away for a year, and I was getting reasonable page views, and I was making a tiny bit of money, like, I don't know, 100 quid a month or something. So I thought, well, that's good. It's proof of concept, right? And then at the same time, I was posting things on Instagram, just, well, I've written a new blog post, and then in January we came back from a trip to Finland, which was sort of completely independent trip to Finland, about 1 million times cheaper than a sort of 2-week package holiday. And I made a post about that, and it just took off. I had 1,000 followers, just over 1,000 followers, and I created that post and then a second post that was kind of related to it. And in a week, I went from 1,000 to 54,000 followers. And then since then, I've grown to 77,000 followers.
And some of your posts have 500,000 views.
Yeah, I know, it's mental.
Oh, that is mental. What was happening to your phone? What did you continue to feed your children? Did you?
It was quite. I was really freaked out by it. I didn't love it at first. Just the sort of idea that all these people were looking at me, and I had a whole concern about, my kids' faces are on there, and do I want that? When it was 1,000 people, most of whom I'd sort of met once in my life or whatever, suddenly it was 70,000. But I talked to my husband. He's not even on social media, ironically, but he's very sensible, and he was like, look, it's not like these people are looking through our windows. Just think of it as, you're basically a billboard in a bigger area, in a more busy junction now than you were. And I thought that was a really good way of looking at it, because it's true, half of those people don't ever look at anything I post again. They followed me and that's it. Some of them are interested, but most of them are nice people. Like, I do get lots of engagement and I have lots of conversations with them, and they're really decent people who often I get, thank you so much. I'm taking a bit of this trip and we're going to do it with our kids. Or one of the things people often say to me is, I would not have thought of going away without my husband, because I quite often take my kids away without my husband because he has 5 weeks of annual leave and I can take off as much time as I want. And I just think, well, if they're on school holidays, why don't we do something fun? So I just take them on my own. And loads of people have said, I would not have thought or had the confidence to do that until I saw what you do. So I was quite freaked out, but but I sort of got used to it quite quickly. And yeah, my phone was kind of blowing up, but I just had to sort of put it down, and then eventually it slowed down. And then I was like, oh no, it's slowing down.
Yeah, so there's the adrenaline rush.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then there's the endorphins.
So a week ago, I really, wanted it to stop, and now I don't.
What happens next?
Yeah, so exactly. So, and I didn't know, because what I had set out to do was to run a blog, not be an influencer. That was accidental. So I had to learn quite a lot of things quite fast. And one of the things I learned was, if you want to keep your audience engaged, you need to be consistent. But that doesn't mean posting every day. I can't post every day. I just can't. That would just drive me. I would go into burnout within about 3 seconds. So I decided I'd post twice a week, which is really manageable. And I do have to keep thinking of content, but actually twice a week I've got plenty of content. And the really brilliant thing is, because I've been plugging away at the blog quietly for a year before that, I've got so much content actually that I can just repurpose into Instagram friendly stuff.
And you've said before, there's a common misconception that suddenly now the money would be coming in as quickly as the followers.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of that number, 77,000, I mean, it really is vanity metrics. It doesn't mean anything unless you leverage it. And that's what I'm trying to do now, basically.
And what have you, I'm not asking for numbers, tell me the kind of things you've done since you went viral.
Yeah, so I'm kind of replacing my previous part-time job salary. So that's great. That's kind of what I wanted to do. And it's through multiple income streams, which I think is quite nice, because things go up and down, right? So I've done a few brand partnerships. So I've done some work with Decathlon. We got given free first-class Interrail passes for our Easter holidays. That was really cool. So I did some content for them in exchange. Yeah, so we've done a few little brand deals, which are great, actually, really great. And quite time-consuming, because you've got to go and do the thing and then create the content. But yeah, I make a sort of decent chunk of money out of those. And then affiliate links on my blog. So now is kind of key time for booking holidays. So I'm seeing quite a lot of income from like booking.com links. Decathlon, I love Decathlon. So I have a whole blog post about kids hiking backpacks, and that's super popular. Through that blog post, probably like one backpack a day gets sold through Decathlon, and I make a tiny little bit of commission.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it comes to authenticity, because your posts are very authentic.
Yeah.
There's very much a family feel about them. Your kids look like normal kids.
Yeah, they are.
Than,
They're very normal, not at all special.
And I suppose that will be something you think about going forward.
Yeah, I would really struggle to do any differently, actually. I have in the past with brands said, just so you know, I'm not going to make my kids perform. So quite often I'll see, and I'm nothing against this, but I'll see accounts where they make their kids like jump into the camera and, put on different, that thing where they are wearing one pair of clothes, and then my kids would just say, no, Mum, I'm not doing that. So I'm very happy to have my kids. I've come to terms with, I don't mind their faces being in there. I'm happy with them being on my account when they're doing the thing that we're doing, but I'm not going to make them perform. And I'm not going to make them wear anything specific. I mean, some of those influencer accounts, you see everyone's wearing a sort of tan matching. No way. I'm not doing that. So it has to be authentic, because that's the only way I feel comfortable. I think I'm quite good at kind of knowing where my boundaries are. So I think that's quite good, because as you say, I think that's why people like me, because I am authentic. And I don't see that changing, because I couldn't do it any other way.
Let's actually talk about the type of holidays you like to go on.
Yeah.
Your children are 12 and 14.
Correct.
And tell us about the hut-to-huts and the...
So hut-to-hut hiking, the first one we did, I think they were maybe 10 and 8 maybe. That was in the Dolomites. The year before, we had done a multi-day bike ride through Austria with my mum and dad. So it was multi-generational. It was the four of us and my mum and dad. We took the overnight. This is actually quite typical of our trips. So we took the Eurostar to Paris. We took an overnight train from Paris to Salzburg, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but you can still go from Brussels to Salzburg. Just the whole trip, from the beginning, getting on the Eurostar was an adventure. It wasn't like, okay, we've got to get this flight over and done with. It was like, right, and it was great, getting on this overnight train to Salzburg. Although I do remember my daughter the train was a tiny bit delayed, and at the exact point the train was supposed to leave, but we hadn't even got on the train yet, she was like, I need a wee. This is classic, and I was like, yeah, but the train might come and go any minute. I have no idea where the loo is. So we had to leg it to some French toilet with a euro and then leg it back. But I was like, this is such bad timing. Like, you could have told me 20 minutes ago. Anyway, overnight train to Salzburg, which was great. And then we rented bikes from Salzburg. We booked a bike taxi. I mean, Austria is so great. They have such amazing infrastructure. So we booked a bike taxi, which is just a thing in Austria, to pick us up from the bike hire shop. Put our bikes on a trailer on the back. We were in a little van.
Sorry, stop.
Yeah.
You order a taxi,
yes,
and it comes with the
trailer. It's called a Rad taxi. So, it's just brilliant. But, in England, you just couldn't get your bikes from A to B unless you put them on the train, I guess. But then you have to book anyway. It picked us up from the bike hire shop. We put our bikes on the back. We went in the van and we got taken all the way up to Krimmel, which is the top of one specific valley. We spent a couple of nights there. There's some amazing waterfalls there. So we did a little hike the next day. There's an outdoor pool. And then we started the cycle back down to Salzburg, all the way down the valley. And there are these amazing bike paths in Austria, which are completely traffic free. Just beautiful little paths through the valley, almost entirely downhill because you're following a river the whole way along. And we just broke it up. So we were doing like 25 to 30 kilometers a day. So that was usually like 2 or 3 hours in the morning. And then we had the afternoon to either go to a lake, swimming or a swimming pool or whatever we wanted to do. I built in a couple of rest days. And then we ended up cycling straight back into Salzburg, dumped our bikes at the bike hire shop and had a couple of nights in Salzburg.
You said you were cycling, it was all downhill, 25 to 30 Ks.
Yeah.
But you said your children aren't endurance triathletes.
No, they're not. No. And that's quite important. And that's something that I try to make clear on my platforms too. They're not endurance athletes. Actually, they're not sporty at school, my kids. So it is really manageable for, of course not everyone, but for most, able-bodied children, it's really manageable. I want it to be fun. There are multiple rides like that in Austria, and they're called Radwegs, which means bike path, but they almost always go along a river. So the first one we did was the Tauern Radweg, and the second one was the Drau Radweg, which goes along the Drau River. And
what is your snack per kilometre ratio?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely use Haribo. Haribo is quite a big bribery factor. Sometimes we steal sandwiches from the breakfast buffet, but we'll quite often sit down and have a proper break. But yeah, food is key. That is very true. And ice cream and, fizzy drinks.
Well, they are teenagers.
Yes, exactly.
Which other summer trip would you recommend?
So, if you combine Austria and Italy, that works really well. So the Dolomites are amazing. So we did a hut-to-hut hike in the Dolomites at the Tre Cime, which is sort of iconic, massive 3 peaks. And you can basically do a circuit around them. And there are multiple huts that you can stay in. And that was our first hut-to-hut hike with kids. And it was very doable because the distances were short. Really short, like maybe 5K a day, something like that. On average, some were shorter, some were longer. Which meant we had loads of spare time. But it's so nice, like, to be there right in the mountains.
Looking ahead to the winter holes, you've also got some good tips for ski holidays.
Yeah. So I'm very lucky because my mum and dad have a flat in the French Alps, and they have done since I was about 20, maybe 18. So we go there, and it's just in Bourg Saint-Maurice, which is at the bottom of Les Arcs ski resort. But Bourg Saint-Maurice it's a French town in its own right. And we really love staying there because it is like a proper French town where people, work and go to school. And there's a funicular that goes from the town straight up to Les Arcs. So I quite often advise that people stay in Bourg because it's a bit cheaper, but also it's just not, you don't get that sort of purpose-built kind of resort feel.
And again, you're a fan of getting the train there.
Yes. So the Eurostar that goes from London to Lille, and then you actually just cross over the platform and go from Lille to Bourg all in one go, is a really, really great way of getting there. I'm not averse to flying at all. I'm not completely anti-flying. But if we can take the train and it makes sense and we've got the time, then I love to do that. It's mainly, definitely because it's sustainable, but mainly for the adventure. It's so much more fun. Yeah, I really love taking the train.
Yeah, card games.
There's a lot of screen time. There really is. I have when we're on holiday, especially when we're traveling, I don't really stop them doing screen time if that's what they want to do. I kind of quite like binge watching something myself. So,
Yeah, fair's fair.
Yeah, exactly.
And for someone at home thinking, I know a lot about X, Y, Z, I wonder if I could do something with it. Where do they start?
In terms of kind of like a blog and that sort of thing, do you mean?
Well, I just think motivation and yes, a blog.
Yeah. If you have some sort of knowledge that you think other people could use, then I think a blog is a really good place to begin. There is a lot of chat about, Google AI is sort of scraping information from blogs, showing them to searchers and not giving the website of the blog. So people's traffic is sort of dropping, I think, because, you're searching for something, you're giving the information, you're not actually having to click through to someone's blog. But I do think there is still sort of, money in blogging. And yeah, I would just say go for it. And with blogging, you can just start. You can do like an hour a week if that's all the time you've got. I was working in a part-time job, but with kids, when I started mine, and I just did a bit every week. You don't need to take ages over it. And it's passive, really. You've written a blog post and then it's sitting there on the internet.
And how do you keep motivated when you feel no one's reading my post? I'm just talking to myself.
Yeah, I think you just have to sort of, just be a bit blind to that, really. I think you just have to keep going. With the Instagram going viral, that has helped me a lot with that because now I can see that I've got a sort of tangible thing that people are looking at. The people are interested in what I write. Whereas if you've got a blog and you look at Google Analytics and you can see, 12 people are looking at my site right now, which is kind of nice, but if you're not getting any sort of feedback from that.
But it also takes time to hone your voice and to learn how to put together the Insta posts.
Yeah.
And things become quicker. But to begin with, you're just finding your feet.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. And there's no reason that can take a year or 2 years or 3 years, and you can still be working full time and still do that and just sort of build things up gradually.
Yeah, and I think there's also something interesting about the niche nature. You've started because it's your interest with Hut to Hut and the hiking, and these are family holidays, not on a shoestring, but on a sensible budget.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is a niche which people are looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, people are looking for all sorts of weird things. Like if you have knowledge about something that anyone ever asks you about, that's a niche that you could create a blog or a social media
And it's
post.
a relatively low entry point in terms of finances.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, exactly. You need to pay for hosting, essentially, for your website and for a web address. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
It is a low entry point for sure.
There's a question we ask all our guests, and that is what you would tell your 30-year-old self about where you are today and what advice you would have for that person.
Okay. So, I mean, I would say don't box yourself into any particular sort of job and don't listen to what other people say too much. I think that's quite important because when I first started the blog, I remember telling some people and they were kind of like, oh, yeah, well, chance would be a fine thing. I sort of said, you can actually make it into a job, and they were like, seems unlikely. And I think you have to just believe in yourself. And if you think that there might be some way of, making a career out of it, then try it. But also, I do think, again, try it. Just try something. I have left quite a few jobs in my time and I've never regretted it. It's always been a bit of a risk. And it's never, I'm sure it could have, but it has not gone wrong. I've never looked back and thought, God, I should never have left that job. And I think for me, kind of growing and learning is what keeps me happy. And I've noticed that with all the proper jobs I've done is that sort of 5 years in, it's almost always 5 years, I am getting bored. And it's just because I'm not learning anything new anymore. And so, yeah, just keep learning, keep moving on and keep learning, and don't be nervous of leaving something or leaving a job or whatever to move on to something else if that's what you want to do. And also there's a lot to be said for common sense, I think. I think you don't have to be a sort of genius to do these things. I think if you're sensible and organised, that is like 80% of the answer to getting shit done.
That is wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.